everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm creating a birthday card. This could also just be a general greeting card or also Valentine's Day card. That holiday is coming up and these colors would definitely lend to that. So to start this card, I'm using an A2 size folded card and a piece of mixed media cardstock, mainly because of the background blending. And I'm going to use the Aviary stamp set, Floral Aviary from Flora and Fauna. This is perfect for this card application. It's such a cute stamp set. I have some embossing powders in Ebony and Snow. And my distress inks I'm using for this card are Squeezed Lemonade, Picked Raspberry, and Wilted Violet. Now I'm also going to use the blender tools, which are just the round blenders, and the little foam discs go on the bottom. And I have Versamark ink for embossing and my acrylic block for stamping. I'm going to use some general kitchen flour, just simple stuff to prepare that surface, and I'm also going to use black cardstock for the sentiment. So to begin, I'm going to use that mixed media cardstock first, and I'm going to prepare the surface with that kitchen flour. So what this does is it takes away any stickiness or any oil that might be on the card, so that when I stamp my embossing ink, the only thing sticky on the card is that ink, and so the embossing powder crystals or little grains will only stick to what's sticky. So I don't get spare embossing flakes elsewhere on the card. I want it just to be where I stamp. So now that I have it all prepared, I'm going to do my first floral stamp, and I kind of just built this as I went. And so starting with the largest stamps first, I find that if you want to do a good composition and get a good balance with your card, it's always better to work largest to smallest with your stamps. It's really easy to fill in the spaces with those smaller stamps, but it's hard to add those larger stamps after if you haven't left space for them. So I like to go in with those first. And I'm using this Ebony embossing powder from Michaels, their Recollections collection, and it is really, really rich black. It's really deep and it looks so pretty. I haven't used this before in this way, so I was really excited to see how that came out once I brushed that off and seen the impression that it left. Now I'm going to put that bird cage in the middle. I kind of left room thinking of how I would position the birds on the cage as well and where my sentiment is going to go. Now I have a little bit of embossing powder sticking where I didn't want it to do or go. So what you can do is just go in with a fine brush. I use like a watercolor brush. It doesn't have to be that specific, but anything that is tiny, just to go in and brush away any flakes before you emboss if they're not in the right spot. So because I've been picking this up, I did run this under my heat tool at this point, so it's all clean again. And so I'm going to re-prepare that surface for my next round of stamps. And so I'm going to put my little bird on the top of the cage. These birds are free birds. They don't live in cages. That's just where they hang out, I guess. So I'm going to put two on this card here. And I do have enough space up there for them. And then lots of space at the bottom too to continue my floral stampings and put my sentiment. So my favorite part, putting on the embossing powder and watching the impression come to life, because when you stamp, you can't really see what's there until you do add that embossing powder. So just cleaning up the little bit of the bird's tail that had a little bit of artifact on it from extra embossing powder that stuck. So now I have this embossed, and I'm going to keep going and doing the bottom set of florals. So I do have a piece of spare paper underneath my work just because I'm stamping and I want to stamp off the edge. I want those florals to feel like there's more of them than just what you see in the image. So I don't want to create any borders. I want to just bleed them off the edge. And so just to catch any extra stamp ink from going onto my work surface, I just have a paper in the background. And this ink or stamping ink is really sticky, so you don't really want to get it on anywhere else than you want it, because it can make a mess and it's painful to clean up, to say the least. So now I am working just biggest to smallest and building up that scene. I kind of want to emulate the same sort of block of space that I created with that top left. So I kind of have a kitty corner design, and I really want to have the same sort of shape or fluid movement through that bottom right corner so it feels balanced and everything is a central focal point. So this is kind of creating the frame for the image. So as I go, I'm just embossing, and this way I can see where I have put a stamp, and so I'm not just kind of doing it blind with that embossing ink that's clear. Now everything's heat set, embossed, And I'm ready to do my ink blending, and I'm going to do this right over top. It will work fine now that everything's embossed. And so I'm going to start in a circular motion because this is very centric card, center-centric. It has everything, all the focal points towards the middle. So I'm going to start with circles and work with the lightest color and then work out to the darkest colors. So I'm starting with that squeezed lemonade first, and I've got a good application down of that. And I always find that when you put down your layers, you want to go a little bit bigger than the actual finished layer or finished shape that you want, just so that you can bleed those colors together. So my yellow started a little bit bigger than it will end up in the end, but it has that extra overhang to blend with that pink so that they gradiate nicely together. I'm also using a scrap piece of paper to hold down my project, just because I don't want to have any fingerprints in my ink, and the distress ink takes a little bit to dry. It doesn't set right away, so you can make marks, and I don't want to do that. So I find just having the paper there just mitigates any of that, and it doesn't create any strange markings. So now you can see that my center circle, that yellow one, that squeezed lemonade, is a little bit smaller, and so I'm just going to go over that edge one more time where I brought in the pink, that picked raspberry, and just bleed those edges together a little bit more. For the wilted violet, I'm just going to come out on the very edges. I just want to give the hint of a shadow, kind of like a vignette creation here. And I don't want to go in too deep because that is a darker color, and I want to keep this kind of bright. And so I'm just going to bring that in on the corners of the pink, trying to blend as little as possible into the pink too far. So I create or keep most of that pink visible, and just a hint of that purple on the outside edges. And then just blending a couple times, I'll do a layer of the purple and then come in with the pink just to blend those edges together, and then maybe one more layer of the purple on the edges as well. And if you do want to make these colors darker, you can keep layering them. I find that with the distress inks, you can layer. You'll get a little bit of a more saturated layer that way than your first application. You can go light or dark. Now, if you were to use the Distress Oxide inks, those are a little more opaque, and so you can get a stronger layer or application of color. It's not that they get darker, they just get more opaque as you lay them down. So if you're layering them, then you're going to see that color build up, whatever color you're adding last. So now I'm just rounding out the edges here, making sure I've got them all kind of balanced and equal. And sometimes it's hard. I find sometimes when I'm working, I'll just look into my camera preview and I can see it from a distance, and I can see where I might have missed just a little bit on one edge, or where one corner might feel a little bit bigger than the other, and I can go back and touch it up. So now I'm going to prepare the surface for the sentiment using that black cardstock, and I just want to cut a piece that's about the same height as my sentiment, just to barely accommodate it. I don't want to make it too big or blocky in this scene. Overall, everything's very delicate and light, and so I want to keep it very light as well. So just measuring that, making sure that it's big enough, and it is. I'm going to emboss this as well just to keep everything consistent. So I'm going to prepare this with some kitchen flour, and I have a folded sheet underneath just to catch any of the extra embossing powder. I can put that back into the jar when I'm done. So I'm stamping the sentiment here, and I'm using that white embossing powder. Now, I had a thought as I was doing this. I do have yellow embossing powder as well. It's kind of an old one that I've had kicking around for years, and I thought that it might be neat to try on the card just because I have that yellow squeezed lemonade in the center. So I was going to do both and just compare and see which color I felt worked best with the final card. So I'm just going to use the extra edge of this strip. I have lots of room. I'm going to trim this up tight, so I have room to add the second version and put that on with the yellow embossing powder just to see how it's going to look. So I'm going to prepare this and then run it under my heat tool really quick just to set it. So now when I bring this back, this is all embossed. This one's ready for positioning. So here's a look at the white and here's a look at the yellow. You can see kind of my thought there that it would match the colors. There isn't any white on the card, so I felt that maybe the yellow might be better. So I'm going to trim these up and have a proper look at them side by side and see which one I like the best, which one I feel that looks the best. I'd be curious to know what you think. Which color do you like better at this point? Let me know in the comments below. So I'm trimming these up real quick with my paper trimmer. I love this thing. It's quick and handy. I can just grab it and throw it on my desk and do quick cuts. And it makes those edges straight. So now I'm going to try both. Trying the yellow and then trying the white. Just to see which one looks best. So now I decided to go with, can you guess? Do you think you know which one I picked? So I decided to go with the white. I chose the white only because I felt that it had a higher contrast and so it stood out more. And I have an affliction for white on black or black on white, just very crisp, clean contrast. I love how clean those colors look together. You can't get a higher contrast than black and white. And even though there's no white on the card, I really loved that contrast. So what I decided to do was bring in my white gel pen and just add some white highlights to my birds. Just putting some little feather strokes on the empty areas and coloring in some of the spaces on the wings that don't have color, that are just poking through with that background, just filling those in with some white as well. So this brings some white into the card so I don't have that stark contrast that's only one spot color. It's okay to use spot colors, but you definitely want to balance it a little bit. So by doing just little drops of white in the birds coloring, it just makes it feel a little more tied together without being too strong of an addition here. So now to glam up my birds a little bit, I'm going to put some Wink of Stella brush pen and clear glitter. Now when I'm adding this, I got to just blot it. I don't want to wipe because it will reactivate the distress ink underneath. So I want to make sure that that doesn't change. And so I find by just blotting or lightly whisking this ink over top, then it won't disturb the ink underneath too much. And I can add the glitz and glam to the birds. So now I'm ready to put the card together. I'm just going to use my tape roller, outline the edges of the picture, and then a couple strokes across the center. Making sure that I have the right open side of the card set up to match with that, that front. So here it is all put together. I have everything pretty well set. It's pretty easy to do at this point once you have your embossing and your distress ink done. And here's a final look at the card. I was really excited with the color, and I just love how the black embossing came out. It's something different, not something I've tried before. And I really like the idea of just that silhouette pattern. And it really just shows off the beauty of those stamps in general because there's no additional coloring or anything to distract from how pretty that line art is in these stamps. I really, really love this effect, and I'm sure I'll do it again with some other cards in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. That really helps and shows your support, and subscribe so you're notified as I post more videos to my channel. Thanks so much for watching.